as we get ready for the Super Bowl by Dr. David Chow at Pro Football Doc on Twitter. He's been joining us all season long. He gave us a health rundown on Monday, and now as we are on the final weekday getting ready for the Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the Bucs, he can give us the absolute latest on health-related concerns. Dr. Chow, my man, I appreciate you hanging out with us.
Thanks for having me, as always.
All right, so let's start here. COVID has been the storyline of the NFL schedule so far this year, with all the challenges that it has brought to bear. Wouldn't have been a Super Bowl in a COVID year without one more crazy story kind of parachuting in associated with the barber for the Kansas City Chiefs testing positive for COVID. So far, it seems like there have been no positive results from that, but there were 20 different players, including Patrick Mahomes, scheduled to get a trim in advance for the Super Bowl. That is just, I mean, can you imagine if the Chiefs had like a ton of players all test positive because of the barber who came in? That would have been an unbelievable story.
That would be certainly incredible. But to explain to fans, it is routine for barbers to come into the facility. And I'm hearing in the past, Andy Reid would not allow the barbers into the facility. But with COVID, it actually makes more sense to let the barber in.
That's right.
Yeah, it's safer because there's up to 5 people you could designate as additional Tier 1, whether it's in-house masseuse or chiropractor, beyond the athletic trainers, doctors, staffers, everyone else for Tier 1. And if you designate a barber, he/she is like subject to daily testing for the COVID protocol to get into Tier 1. And that arguably can be safer than to have Patrick Mahomes and 20 other guys getting individual barbers to come to their homes or going somewhere, where the testing may not be there. And that's probably why the Chiefs were smart to change their policy. They were one of the few not to allow barbers into the facility pre-pandemic. And with the pandemic, they went the other way, and there's some smartness to it. Now, should the barber may have waited the 15 minutes for his point-of-care test to be negative before he started under Marcus Robinson and was halfway through Daniel Kilgore? Maybe. But the good news is they did both all have their masks on. And with that, I think the chances remain low that they will test positive, which is great, but they'll have to wait the full 5 days. Apparently the contact was on Sunday, so they'll have to wait the full 5 days before they clear and then fly down to Tampa.
It is pretty interesting. We're breaking through. So it seems as if there are no major COVID issues that are going to emerge from these teams, right? And that is what you've been predicting, because as the number of teams has diminished, the overall discipline involved, I mean, the significance of the games increase, and you have to imagine these guys are interacting a lot less with everybody else. But also, the NFL basically came out with their full season report and said, hey, with all the testing that we put our players through and everything else, it's probably the case that there were fewer COVID cases among NFL players than there might have been if they hadn't played. In other words, there's a higher COVID positivity rate in the general public than there ended up being in the NFL. So for people out there who were talking about whether you could do this safely, I think the NFL has an argument. I'm curious if you agree, Dr. Chow, that they've actually managed to make it safer for their players and their families based on the protocols they put in place. Certainly that's the case compared to the general public as a whole.
Well, I would say yes and no. Where the NFL has done extremely well, look, they publish rates of 0.08%. Less than 0.1% of their tests were positive. Now, that's a little bit misleading. There's no question that if your workplace tested everyone around you, that might make you safer for 12 hours of the day, right, wherever you're at the workplace, right? Now, as opposed to doing your own things out in the community. Now, is it safer than just staying in your home? That's arguable, right? So for place, the NFL made it as safe as possible. It is a little misleading that it's 0.1% positive because they were tested every day. So you rack up a lot of negatives before you get a positive, right? I mean, you could test negative for 30 straight days, you test positive once, where 100 straight days, test positive once and it's 1%, right? So it's a little bit misleading that way. But certainly I think the NFL has done a good job. And if you think back, I retweeted, again, recently the viral load article when I first started OutKick writing about 7-8 months ago in the summertime. And I remember getting a lot of grief saying, you're crazy. People are tackling each other, going to sweat on each other. This isn't going to work. And that viral load article explained why transient contact wasn't going to transmit the virus or get someone COVID. And throughout this entire NFL season, there has not been a single documented case of across the sideline to an opponent, across the line of scrimmage to an opponent transmission. Sure, within a team, within your own sidelines, within your own locker room and whatever, there have been some. So I'm not saying COVID is not real, but just the act of tackling someone. And remember when the internet went crazy when Patrick Mahomes, after the game, hugged Stephon Gilmore. At that point, I said, look, if he gets COVID from that simple hug post-game, you should shut the NFL down completely and immediately. And he didn't, and it made medical sense that he didn't. So it's not denying COVID, it's just knowing how it's transmitted. And I caught a lot of flack when I wrote that for OutKick in the beginning, but thankfully it's turned out to be true.
Okay, so we seem to be in pretty decent shape as COVID threats, because we started talking about this, by the way, you and I did, back in the earliest days of thinking about what the COVID test protocols might be, with the idea being, hey, what if Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady tested positive right before the Super Bowl and suddenly weren't able to play? Knock on wood, right? Those are the guys that would change the outcome of the game most significantly in one direction or the other. But it appears, other than in the wild card round when Kevin Stefanski and a couple of Cleveland Browns had COVID-related issues, basically the NFL wild card divisional round, championship games, and now the Super Bowl has managed to get to this point without the overall question of who the best teams are being impacted by COVID.
Yeah, for the most part, that's certainly true. I mean, you could argue that COVID still had an impact on the Chiefs, given that Laurent Duvernay-Tardif opted out at the beginning of the year, and their offensive line is now a little bit of a patchwork right now. So you could still argue that. But in general, look, the NFL has survived without a bubble, and the NFL has survived the playoffs without a bubble. And so far, knock on wood, and I would imagine as not only as teams are fewer, so there's fewer opportunities to test positive, teams, players, and staff get more diligent. Who wants to miss out on this chance to play in the Super Bowl, right, or to participate in the Super Bowl? So I would imagine they're smart and they're really locking themselves down even more than in the regular season. And I hope that continues, because right now, if someone were to test positive or, quote, have a close contact, high risk, they're done. We're within the window of you cannot play in the Super Bowl. And Phillip Rivers, in a conference call before the season started, asked this question when the league was and the PA were informing the players about what the protocols were. He said, well, what happens if someone tests positive leading up to the Super Bowl, the week of the Super Bowl, but has no symptoms? We're not playing any games after this Super Bowl. Are we going to be allowed to play? And the answer was no. And I think players know this, and so they really need to be diligent, and I believe they will be diligent.
Okay, now that we've kind of broken down the overall COVID impact here, Dr. Chow, what can you tell me? Let's start with the Chiefs. And I think the most significant health-related concern for any team in this game is the Chief offensive line issues, which you just hinted at. How concerned are you about the Chiefs' health on the offensive line? What about elsewhere on this team?
Well, you know, a lot of the focus had been on Patrick Mahomes, but it's pretty clear he's going to be fine with his toe, with the carbon fiber plate tape and/or injection. Maybe he won't be 100%, but he's going to be fine. Sammy Watkins is trending towards playing. Le'Veon Bell has a chance to play. Clyde Edwards-Helaire will get healthier. You know, I've always joked and marveled at the healing abilities of that extra week before the Super Bowl, and that seems to be the case, except for Willie Gay, linebacker, who tore his meniscus, had surgery, and is out for sure. L'Jarius Sneed is cleared concussion protocol. That leaves the offensive line. And Eric Fisher, left tackle, the high draft pick, the first pick of the draft in his year, tore his Achilles and is out. And people have been saying, yeah, they don't have both their tackles, but it goes deeper than that. Mitchell Schwartz, the right tackle, has been out since week 6 or so. And Mike Remmers, his backup, the guy, by the way, who JPP didn't know his name, but I guess he doesn't know opponents' names very much, so it wasn't an insult. But he's flipping over to left tackle. But here's the domino. Eric Fisher's out. Now you're taking your backup right tackle and moving him to backup left tackle. Your backup right guard, Andrew Wiley, who came in for LDT at the beginning of the season, now slides to right tackle. And Stefan Wisniewski, who's a good player, but was a free agent, cut by the Steelers in November, picked up by the Chiefs, is now your starter at right guard. And your left guard from the beginning of the season, Kelechi Osemele, tore tendons in his knee very early on. So when you really get down to it, 4 out of the 5 are different. You could argue that it's backup left tackle, left guard, and third string right guard, right tackle. You could make that argument. So that will be a very interesting point to watch, especially with JPP, Shaq Barrett, who had 5 sacks against the Packers, and that probably made the big difference. And Vita Vea now 2 weeks healthier after playing a little under 50% of the plays, coming back from his ankle fracture dislocation from week 5. So that's the key to watch.
Okay, so that's on the Chiefs side. What from the perspective of the Bucs, is there anything that is anywhere near as significant for the Bucs as what might happen on the Chiefs' offensive line?
The main issue for the Bucs is in their safeties. Ronald Jones, I think, will be healthier and probably will become the 1A back again, as opposed to Leonard Fournette being now the 1B. Alex Kappa, their right guard, is still out. Antonio Brown is trending to play. But the real issue is in the safeties. Antoine Winfield Jr., the strong safety, missed the conference championship game. But he's been trending to play all along. We've expected him to play all along. He's declared for sure he will play. Hopefully he will play at 100%. That's something to watch with his ankle. The most questionable player to play in the Super Bowl is the free safety, Jordan Whitehead. He's been listed with a shoulder and a knee. National Reporter indicated maybe a labral tear. By video, I think he tore his pec tendon and needs surgery. Now, at free safety, he can run and cover. He can defend passes. But assuming he has a torn left pec, he won't be able to wrap up with that left arm. He'll be able to shoulder tackle people, but I think that's the most questionable guy to play, and it looks like the Bucs are still trying to get him there. He did practice this week for the first time in limited fashion, so we'll see what happens. That's probably the single biggest up or down question mark that we have going into the Super Bowl.
Is there any aspect associated with this from a gambling perspective? I know you don't like to make gambling picks. We're about to do some of that with Super Bowl props. We talked about Super Bowl props at the end of the first hour. We're going to have a few more for you at the end of the second hour that we kind of like. Is there any side that stands out to you? Right now, the Chiefs are a 3-point favorite over the Bucs based on injury. Would you say the Bucs are a lot healthier than the Chiefs? What letter grade would you give the two teams? Does it incline you to bet one way or the other?
The Bucs are healthier than the Chiefs, although the Packers and Bills were healthier than both the Chiefs and the Bucs, and we know who's in the Super Bowl now. But here's what I would say from a perspective. If I were in a legal gaming state and in Vegas here, if I can do it, I might do it here, sign up and do it in game. I might be inclined to watch the first series, and especially the offensive line of the Chiefs, and see how they handle Vita Vea, JPP, and Shaq Barrett. If they can handle them, I lean towards the Bucs. Cannot handle them, I lean toward the Bucs. If they can, I lean towards the Chiefs. Now, if you're making a pregame wager, I think the Chiefs, it's really going to depend on how many points they score and how the defense does and how their offensive line does. So I might pair up Bucs and under and Chiefs and over. I mean, the Bucs are going to score in the mid-20s or high 20s. So if they're going to win, they're going to have to hold the Chiefs into the 20s. If they're not going to win, the Chiefs will score well into the 30s. So that's, to me, the two pairings. As far as prop bets and other things, I'll give you a sneaky one. Everyone says Patrick Mahomes has his toe issue and, still isn't 100%. Now offensive line, everyone says under on his rushing yards, 18.5. I actually would lean over for the exact same reason. I think his toe's okay. B, sack yards don't count against rush yards, but scramble yards do count for rush yards. So if you have a really powerful defensive line and your offensive line is a little bit shaky, potentially there's a couple extra scrambles in there from Patrick Mahomes, and that will hit you the over on the 18.5 rushing yards.
That's a good tip. I don't know about you, Dub, but I'm jotting that one down. I think on our show yesterday, somebody took the over for rushing yards for Patrick Mahomes. But I think that's a good tip indeed. I know that you are planning on being in Vegas for the Super Bowl. What do you expect for Vegas to look like as it pertains to the Super Bowl? And have you ever been there for the Super Bowl before?
Last 6 years I've always been wherever the Super Bowl was, doing the media stuff and then being at the game. But this year decided not to go. I didn't even apply for a media credential because you knew how locked down it would be. And so I have some friends that always go to Vegas, and they've invited me along, and I'm going to check it out. I haven't been there. I don't think there's going to be any big parties per se, but I'm sure Circa will have, their outdoor parties in smaller groups and things, and, different places will have smaller type gatherings without a lot of crowds and so forth. So we're going to be safe, but we're going to have some fun. And I will be in a legal gaming state, so maybe I will put down a little bit of money on some of this. And if you missed any of this, if you go to the OutKick site, obviously we've talked about the prop bets and also the thoughts on the game itself broken down there.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And by the way, what's the weather supposed to be? Because I know it's been snowing some. My buddy Todd Furman is a Vegas native, so I hear from him quite a bit about what the weather conditions are. Are you going to be able to enjoy any sunshine, or is it going to be pretty cold?
I think there's going to be some sunshine. As a matter of fact, I just got the email yesterday that I was signed up for a foursome for golf later today.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
So I think we'll be okay.
All right. Well, have a good time. Enjoy the game. We appreciate you coming on all season with us, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.